ladies and gentlemen of the ton, once again. I've come back in my princess getup because we're once again reviewing another Pat McGrath Bridgerton collection, but this is the second Bridgerton collection release, just in time for the second season of Bridgerton. Let me know if you guys have watched it already. I've already binge watched it. So today I have the palette to review, and isn't she beautiful? And then I also have this cheek palette, which has the blushes and a highlight in it, and that's a completely new cheek formula. And then I also have these SatinAllure lipsticks, which the packaging is absolutely just precious, divine, beautiful, stunning. So cute. So I do 3 looks with the palette and pair it with the baked blushes. And also with each of the looks, I show you the new SatinAllure colors that I picked up, swatched on my lips. And then towards the end, I'll also have a separate swatches and comparisons section that's specifically comparing all of the new shades to older things in my collection, especially the first Bridgerton collection, just so you can like kind of compare and contrast and see if you want to pick up this second one, if you already have it or if you don't. But before we get into it, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe if you want to see more content like this, because it really helps out my channel and it would really mean a lot to me. And let's just get right into the video. So for the first look, I'm going to do like the most neutral look you can get out of this. I'm going to start off with this middle B shade called Regency Romance. So I'm going into Regency Romance and just using that as a transition shade. It is kind of like a big gelée type formula, so it's a little bit like stiffer and more sheer and buildable. Going into that same shade and just putting that on the bottom lash line. I'm going to add some depth to the outer corner with this Lady Whistledown shade called Forbidden Amour. I'm just putting that in the outer corner here, like a V shape. Now we're gonna go into this shade called Diamond's Desire, and it's a super pretty shade and it's super high impact and glittery. So I'm just gonna lightly tap that. Okay, yeah, it's definitely giving. It's giving all the sparkle and glam. That shade is definitely super beautiful. Also, this is pretty unique for Mother Pat to put a special shade in a 6-pan, because normally she doesn't do that. She did do it in the other Bridgerton palette. I'm just talking about in general. Kind of makes this palette stand out. Like, look how gorgeous that sparkle is. And it's kind of multi-dimensional too. It's mostly champagne, like a champagne rosy shade, but I feel like it has a slight greenish tinge to it. Super wearable, but still unique. Now I'm just gonna take this shade, which I think is Refinement, tap that in the inner corner, along the front half of the bottom lash line. This is just her typical like metallic formula. I like this shade because it's pretty brightening, because sometimes Pat McGrath's like champagne-y shades are a little bit on the deeper side, like if you have fair skin. So yeah, this one is not deep at all, like it doesn't have a dark cast. Super pretty. I'm really liking how this is coming out so far. And then lastly, for this neutral, I'm just gonna go in with this Forbidden Amour shade again, use it as a shadow liner. Okay, so this shade is actually not that deep for like a lining shade. Like it's quite bright for a liner. It's like a maroon type of shade, but it's like you can tell that it's maroon instead of like dark brown. I like it though, because I feel like it makes it a little bit more unique. Okay, so that's basically it for this eye. I'm just gonna put some mascara on, and then I'll be right back to do the cheek and the lip. And I'm back with this eye done. Let's see here. And the glittery shade is definitely doing it for me. Like it's so impactful and so shimmery and sparkly. I just love it. Okay, so now we're gonna go into this, which is the Blushing Delights palette, or I don't really know what to call this. So to pair with this look, I'm actually gonna go in with the most berry shade, since the other 2 looks that I'm planning on doing are gonna be more warm toned. I feel like this berry blush is not gonna go as well with those, whereas with this neutral look, you can kind of just pair it with anything. So I'm gonna go into this shade, and this is called Berry Brilliance. So the thing about mine is like, it's like this, right? But my sticker is upside down, so I have to like keep turning it like this. So that's just like a little annoying thing. She's quite pigmented. This is a really good color for getting that like Regency era, or just like period drama kind of like blushy cheek, like oh I'm so flushed and in love look. Okay, so right off the bat I feel like it's a little bit more pigmented than her regular like divine blushes, but also I'm not sure if that's just because it's like a really dark shade. But I do own some of her darker powder blushes, and I feel like they're a little bit more buildable, whereas this one I just like tap my brush in once and it's very pigmented. Yeah, you can see how that gave me a super flushed look. And I guess I'll add some of the highlighter as well. So this is in the shade Champagne Venus. It seems like it's quite golden shade, and ooh, that's looking pretty. It's a little bit more golden than what I would normally go for, especially with like a cool tone blush, but I think it looks good. And it's not too deep for my skin tone. If you have a fairer complexion, it looks pretty good, and you can see how that just added that glow. Okay, and then lastly for the lip, I'm gonna go in with this. First of all, can we just take a second to appreciate the packaging? Like the bow is giving, like it's so cute, and I love this shade of blue. And I'm gonna go in with the shade Veiled Rose, because this is the coolest tone lipstick that I picked up. It's described as a mid-tone mauve pink, which are like some of my favorite types of shades. But it's a very comfortable formula. First, I have to say that this mauve is actually quite cool toned. Like it's even more cool toned than the berry blush. The berry is actually like pulling a little bit warm on my skin, but I feel like on deeper skin it might look cooler. The lip is definitely much cooler than the blush, but I feel like it still looks pretty good. I mean, it's just overall like kind of pinky look. This is super pretty. I would definitely just pair this with like a cooler toned look overall. And as for the formula, so this is her new SatinAllure formula because she discontinued her Luxe Trans lipstick, which were a satin lipstick. I know that people are gonna be interested in seeing what the difference is between the two formulas. And straight off the bat, what I can tell you is that the new SatinAllure is more like a tinted lip balm meets a satin lipstick. It's a lot sheerer, but you can definitely build it up to like a more opaque coverage. But directly from the two, it's gonna be like a more like light to light medium lip coverage. So let me know what you guys think of this first look. It's just a very neutral, like pinky rosy look. Super pretty. I feel like this would be like a Daphne Bridgerton look, but she wasn't the star of this season. So now I'm just gonna remove the lipstick so we can get into the next eye look. Okay, so for the next look, I want to focus on this olive green shade. That is absolutely beautiful. The only thing is, the only like matte shades are a very reddish purple like maroon tone, which I wouldn't personally pair with like this type of green gold shade. So if I were to use this in like my regular life, I would use this palette in conjunction with like other matte palettes. But for the purposes of reviewing this palette, I'm only gonna stick with this palette itself. We're just gonna go back into the B shade called Regency Romance and just use that as a light base. So I really like that this shade is very sheer, since this is kind of like the most versatile matte in the palette. And you can also use this type of like baked shade as a blush, which I used in my previous Bridgerton palette review, which I'll link up here. I show you how to use it like on the cheeks and eyes, which is kind of like what it was meant for, but this time we're just gonna use it on the eyes since we also have blushes to go through. But yeah, so this shade is quite versatile, which is really nice. Again, I'm just gonna put that on the bottom lash line. And now we're just gonna go into the main star of the show, which is this shade called Forever Charmed. Look at that, it's such a unique kind of like foresty olivey green. Super pigmented too. Classic Pat McGrath formula. It's one of those that's like a little bit more baked, kind of like a gel also. I think you can make the green pop more if you layer this over a black base. Just like wipe my finger off and you can see how it like the green itself has a black undertone to it. It's quite smoky and olivey. I'm just gonna blend that out a little bit at the edges. It's just a little bit smokier than what I would go for, but I think it still looks really pretty. Now I'm just gonna add some inner corner highlight, go in with the same refinement shade and add that in here. Actually, I want to see what this would look like with this Diamond's Desire special shade layered on top of it, just as like a little spotlight. Okay. So it's kind of like dulling down the yellowness because there's like a very strong yellow undertone to this green. So it kind of dulls that down in the middle, but besides that, it's adding some extra sparkle, which I really like. We'll just keep it like that because I don't want to change the green color too much. Now I'm gonna go off camera and do my own mascara and then I'll be right back. So now I'm back with the mascara all done. So obviously this looks a lot better and just a lot more polished and put together. Like mascara always pulls everything together, you know? Okay, so now going back into the blush palette, I'm gonna use this really peachy shade because I always feel like peachy shades plus like these olivey warm toned greens like are the best combination. So this is in the shade Aphrodisia. Okay, so I think this is more of a coral than a peach, and on the cheeks I feel like it pulls more pink than in the pan. See how like it does look a little bit pinker on my cheeks. So we're just gonna keep building this up. I can say that this one is definitely less pigmented than the berry shade, so it's probably just because of the depth of that berry shade that it's so pigmented. And also all of these have a slight sheen to them, but it's nothing very obvious. On my skin, I can't see any like shimmer particles, so that's good. Gonna go back into the Champagne Venus shade and add some highlighter. Okay, so I do want to point out that I think this highlighter does have some glitter particles in it. Like it's not gonna be the most natural, pure glowy highlighter. It's definitely a little bit more glam and I can see like the specks of glitter. I feel like glitter highlight is kind of making a comeback, or I don't know, but like I know especially for like Douyin makeup, which is like Chinese TikTok, Instagram makeup, they always use super glittery highlight. Like you can like see the glitter. And with products like the Fenty Diamond Bomb highlights and things like that, I feel like maybe glitter highlighters are coming back into trend. I don't personally mind a glittery highlight, but just like I'm not gonna wear that for like a day-to-day thing, but you know, if I'm going out at night or somewhere where it's like dimly lit, I feel like the glittery highlight actually looks really good. And if you just want to be like a little bit more glam. Okay, so now going into the lips. So now we're gonna go into these coral packaging ones. So this is also so gorgeous. We're gonna go into the shade Venusian Peach. It's gonna be a light peachy nude. So you can see how it's quite sheer upon like first application. But you can definitely like build up the color. And it's just very, very balmy. Super comfortable on the lips. This is super pretty. I think the peachy lip really tied it together. And also like made it more wearable. So this is the final olive green look. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments. But yeah, I'm loving the two looks I came up with. They're definitely very different. So you can see that this palette has a lot of variety. And I'm just gonna remove everything so we can go into the final look. Okay, now I'm back so we can do the final look. So we're gonna go into this minty shade because I tried to match my dress to this shade today. Again, I'm gonna go back into this Regency Romance shade. Bringing that along the bottom. I'm gonna add a little bit of this Forbidden Amour to the outer corner. Now I'm gonna go into the main mint shade called Daring Dandy. So this is gonna be like her regular metallic formula. And ooh, it's very impactful. That is such a pretty shade of mint. I don't think I have a shade quite like this one actually. I'm gonna build that up more in the center. Okay, now I'm gonna go in with Diamond's Desire, and I'm gonna put that in the inner corner to add some sparkle. I'm gonna kind of pull that up here a little bit and like this little divot here so you can see that like sparkle when I tilt my head back. That sparkly shade is just so pretty. I'm gonna go into the champagne shade called Refinement along the bottom lash line. Now I'm gonna go back in with Forbidden Amour and do like a wing with it. And also in the outer part of the bottom lash line like this. And you don't really connect the wings. It's just to like elongate my eye shape like that. You're kind of doing like two wings. Okay, so that's about it for the eyeshadow on this eye. So now I'm just gonna go off camera and do the same on this eye and put some mascara. And now I'll be back to do the rest of the face. Okay, so now I'm back with the eyes all done. You can see here, there's a nice minty moment. Now we're gonna go back into the blush palette and we're gonna use the last shade I haven't used yet, which is this pinky one called Budding Romance. Okay, so this is quite a pink shade, like it's like a true pink. So I probably wouldn't have picked this shade to go with this look. But I will say like these particular shades are really good for this kind of period drama flush that I've been talking about. So we have that. And you can see it adds a slight sheen, but it's definitely nothing too obvious. Now I'm gonna go into the highlighter. Also I wanna mention that I think this highlighter is actually pretty sheer slash buildable. It's not one of those like super metallic, you only have to add a teeny bit to get that blinding highlight, but I prefer a more buildable highlight, so this is more up my alley in that sense. I'm definitely building up like multiple layers of this and it's not like building up to look too much. And it definitely has more of a sheer color to it. I feel like the color itself is not super opaque compared to some highlighters. So yeah, as you can see here, just adds that nice golden glow. I have two more of these SatinAllure shades. So I'm gonna first go on with the cool tone one. So this is in the shade Nude Romantique 2. So this is a lighter, like more pinky nude. This formula is really nice, feels very luxurious. And I love the colors. I only picked up the more nudie colors since those are the colors I like to wear. So this is the shade Nude Romantique 2. And it's the cooler tone of the two that I'm gonna show you. Now I'm gonna remove it and be right back. And I'm back with this warm tone shade. So this is in the shade Negligee. I feel like this goes better with the warm tones in the eyes. The other warm tone one, Venusian Peach, would also look really good with this, but I haven't worn this one yet. Okay, and here's the final look. Okay, so now I'm gonna zoom you guys out so we can start doing some swatches and comparisons. Okay, so my main comparison is gonna be between the two Bridgerton palettes, Bridgerton 1 and Bridgerton 2, because I know a lot of people, myself included, thought that at first like they look really similar. So I swatched them both on my hand here. So this side is Bridgerton 1 and this side is Bridgerton 2. So hopefully you can see. So I would say like half of the palette is similar. Both of them have this champagne-y shade and both of them have a similar-ish like blushy shade, and then they both have that maroony purple shade. The other three shades in each palette are quite different. They have like the same base, but then they go off in different directions. And I think I heard that this second Bridgerton palette is kind of based more on the Featheringtons, which makes sense. It's more warm toned. There's kind of some yellow, gold, green shades, whereas the original Bridgerton is definitely more cool toned and it's just more focused on the blue colors, which are like the Bridgerton colors. So that difference makes sense to me. And even within the similar shades, there are slight differences, but I guess on the eyes, they don't look that different. So first of all, between the champagne shades, the Bridgerton 2 palette, which by the way is called Belle of the Ball. The first one is called Diamond of the First Water. So this Belle of the Ball palette is more of a true neutral champagne. There's basically no undertone to it, like no obvious undertone. It's just like a true champagne. Whereas the one in the Diamond of the First Water palette has a slight pinky tinge to it. And then moving on to that blushy shade, which is like the one with the bee imprint. So the one in the Belle of the Ball palette is definitely warmer toned, whereas the one in the original is cooler toned. And then here are the two equivalent special shades in each of the palettes. Obviously they're quite different. The one in Belle of the Ball is like a champagne-y rose gold shade, whereas the one in the original is a nice like duochrome purple blue lavender. The one in the original Bridgerton is a little bit more like sheer in terms of base pigment. It's more duochrome and kind of more of a transformative shade, although I love it by itself as well. But hopefully, as you can see, there's not as much base pigment to it. Like the blue is more in the reflect, whereas for this champagne-y shade in the Belle of the Ball palette, it's definitely more opaque and it will like cover over your eyelid, if that makes sense. Moving on to the berry maroon shade that both the palettes have, I'm gonna say that this is probably the most similar between the two palettes. It's the one that has like the Lady Whistledown imprint in both of them. Within the swatch, you can tell a slight difference. Okay, I'm just gonna call this the Featherington palette. Okay, the one in the Featherington palette is warmer once again. It has a stronger red undertone, whereas the one in the Bridgerton palette is just more maroon / purple based. So hopefully you guys can see that, but honestly, that's gonna be also a very slight difference, not gonna be noticeable in the eyes. And then we go into the true, like more regular metallic in both of these. So obviously super different. We have a minty blue shade in Featherington and then like this dusty rosy mauve shade in the original Bridgerton. They're actually slightly different formulas. The one in the original Bridgerton is just a lot more creamy, like super high impact. You barely have to dip your finger in and it's just like complete opaque coverage. Whereas this minty shade in the Featherington palette is a little bit more regular of a metallic. I guess you could say it's drier, but it's not like dry. It's just a regular powder shadow. It doesn't have that creaminess that this one has. I mean, it's still beautiful on the eyes, but hopefully you can see that it is more subtle and it does take a few more layers if you want to build up like a really opaque mint shade. And then lastly, moving on to the last bee shade, which is kind of also like a special, or at least it's like a baked type shade. It has a very thin texture, but it's very impactful. There's just no equivalent between the two. This is that almost beetle-like olive green because it has that black base, but the flip is super strong. And then here we have another kind of like berry blush shade. So after comparing these, they're not as similar as some of you may have originally thought, but yeah, about half the palette can be duped between the two. So yeah, if you already have the original Bridgerton and you really don't want repeat shades, this is gonna repeat about half of them. You can kind of decide what that means to you. To me personally, it's worth it because the palettes are different enough, since like half of it's the same but half of it's different. And then I guess the other thing you can take into account when deciding which palette to pick up is that the Featherington one, the Belle of the Ball, is just a lot more warmer tone in general, like whereas the Bridgerton one, the Diamond of the First Water, is a lot more cool toned. You can kind of decide based off of that as well. Okay, so now I'm back with blush swatches. So this line here is the new blush palette, including the highlight up here, which is quite sheer, so hopefully you guys can see that at least in the reflection. And then yeah, you have the three blushes here, and then I already swatched some comparisons. So first up we have the highlight, Champagne Venus. So there's not going to be an exact dupe, and also because all of these are baked, which is a new type of like blush cheek formula for Pat McGrath, so there's not going to be a formula dupe. But for highlight, the only highlight I have is this one from the Divine Blush and Glow Trio in the shade Amber Allure. This highlight specifically is called Venus Nectar. Yeah, in comparison, Venus Nectar is a lot deeper. It just has like this very obvious peachy undertone compared to Champagne Venus. Yeah, the formula is very different. Champagne Venus is a lot thinner because it's that baked formula, whereas Pat McGrath's like regular powder formula is actually a lot creamier. So it's like a little bit thicker of a formula, but not in a bad way. It's just like it has a more creamy texture. Really, you guys can see some of the texture difference. This Champagne Venus has like these sparkly particles in it. If you don't like glittery highlights at all, you're not gonna like this. So next we have the shade Aphrodisia, which is this kind of corally shade right here. I think the closest would be Electric Bloom, but that's actually the only Pat McGrath blush I don't own, so can't compare that for you guys. What I do have, which is like a more nudie peach shade, is the shade Nude Venus. So obviously from the pan it's not going to be the same, and you can see here it's just a lot more nude and neutral, but it does have that warm undertone, whereas this Aphrodisia color is just a lot brighter. It's like a bright coral. For those of you who like a brighter blush, I think you'll love this palette because all the blushes are quite on the bright side. There's definitely no exact dupe for this. Moving on to this shade called Berry Brilliance. I brought out my berry blush from Pat McGrath, and this is in the shade Love Struck. And again, this is in the trio because this is how I have these two darker blush shades from Pat McGrath. So you guys can see the difference between Berry Brilliance, which just has a lot more red in it, compared to Love Struck. Love Struck is a lot cooler tone. Like there's even like this purpley undertone to it. And then here, I was like, oh, it kind of looks similar to Paradise Venus as well, which is this more terracotta shade. So I swatched Paradise Venus over here. So actually it seems a little bit more similar to Paradise Venus, but this Berry Brilliance shade actually kind of looks like if you mixed Love Struck and Paradise Venus together. So it's kind of like in between these two. Yeah, again, no exact dupes. Moving on to this bright pink shade called Budding Romance. So the only bright pink blush I have from Pat McGrath is Cherish. So this I thought was going to be a pretty good comparison. And I guess they're the most similar out of the swatch comparisons that I have. But yeah, I have to say that Budding Romance is actually warmer. So Cherish has this coolness to it. But as you can see, this is definitely more of like a warmer true pink blush. But they do have a very similar vibe and they're kind of similar in their brightness. So that's the only shade that I would say is like kind of more dupable. If I had to choose between like my regular Pat McGrath blushes and these new baked blushes, I would still pick the regular Pat McGrath blushes. Because I have to say that this Pat McGrath formula is just a lot more unique. Like if you've been following my channel, you know that these Pat McGrath blushes are actually some of my favorite powder blushes of all time. The original is just a lot more creamy. Like I don't know how to explain, but when you apply it to the cheeks, it just doesn't look like you applied a powder to the cheeks, if that makes sense. It almost has the equivalent effect of like applying a cream blush that's like not too glowy. It's a powder that has all the pros of a cream blush, nice glowy skin-like effect, and it also has all the pros of a powder blush, which are that like it lasts longer and in my opinion it kind of blurs over pores and texture. Whereas for these baked ones, what I noticed from applying on my cheeks and stuff, it just seems more like a regular powder blush. Even I guess like the Milani baked blushes I feel like could be similar to this. I just feel like it's not as unique of a formula, and I feel like the formula is more dupable. But as for the shades though, I have to say they're quite perfect for spring and summer. Like they're very bright and they're not really dupable in Pat McGrath's blush line. So if you've been wanting more vibrant punchy blush options for Pat McGrath, I feel like it would be perfect for that. So lastly, I am gonna swatch the SatinAllure lipsticks. Ignore the bottom two, but basically these four are the new SatinAllure ones. And I have the two warmer ones in the coral packaging on this side. I have the two cool tone ones in the blue packaging on this side. And then these bottom two are actually two of my only Luxe Trance lipsticks. These have since been discontinued, but I assume since a lot of you are Pat McGrath fans, you might have some of these Luxe Trance lipsticks. Immediately off the bat from swatching, I can tell there's a very obvious difference. And I mentioned it earlier when I was applying these to my lips. These SatinAllure ones are essentially like a pigmented tinted lip balm, just like a very nice balmy, nourishing formula. And they're also quite sheer, so I had to build these up. Each of these swatches were built up about like 5 times. This is the shade Negligee in SatinAllure, and this is the shade Realness in Luxe Trance. So I feel like these two are actually the most similar. So actually I'm going to show you a live swatch so you can kind of see the difference. Hopefully you can see that it's quite sheer. Obviously there is pigment, but it's kind of like I have to go over it multiple times before you see the same amount of like opacity that this one has. So I have Realness and Beautiful Creature here on the bottom, and those were one swipe. I'll do another Realness swatch so you guys can see. Look at that pigment. Like ba-bam. These two are the same shade, I just had to do a live swatch for you. So yeah, one swipe of Luxe Trance is kind of equivalent to the color of like 5 swipes of the SatinAllure. And I actually think that these new SatinAllure lipsticks might be my new favorite like formula type from Pat McGrath. It's a very sheer buildable formula. So depending on how many times you layer it, the color is gonna look different. You could wear it as a very sheer lip or a more opaque lip. So I really like the versatility of that. Formula wise, perfect. Also the colors, I really like the colors because like they're these perfect nudes, and then you have your warm tones and you have your cool tones. I only picked up the more nudie shades, but they have a couple like deeper shades, and there's also red. These SatinAllure lipsticks are honestly really good and kind of like a highlight of this collection for me. And I also love the bow packaging. Like I can't even deal with how cute this is. So that's about all my thoughts on the Pat McGrath Bridgerton II collection. Let me know what you guys thought about this season down below. Like what did you guys think of the whole like love triangle thing? And also love that they're giving like brown representation in like mainstream media. Like it's very rare that you see Asian leads, especially like Indian or Southeast Asian leads, especially because they didn't make it a big deal that they were Indian, if that makes sense. It was more like they were the leads and they happened to be Indian. I really like that part about the whole Bridgerton universe. I want some more East Asian representation in the next season, if there is going to be a next season. Let me know what you guys thought about this season down in the comments below. I'd love to chat with you guys in the comments. Don't forget to thumbs up this video if you like this video, and also subscribe if you want to see more content like this because it really helps on my channel and it would really mean a lot to me. And I'll see you all in my next video. Bye!